Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar. In this webinar you will learn how to build a TV app with the MAF SDK and test it in the RDK emulator. The acronym MAF stands for Metrological Application Framework and is founded by Metrological, while the RDK stands for Reference Design Kit and is founded by Comcast, Time Warner and Liberty Global. The RDK is a standardized software stack that provides a common method to manage complex video functions such as tuning, conditional access, DRM and stream management, enabling faster deployment of next-gen video products and services for multi-channel video providers. It is supported by more than 200 licensees like software developers, system integrators and manufacturers of system-on-chip and consumer electronics. To make a long story short, when you test your TV app inside the RDK emulator, you are actually testing against any RDK compliant device. If you haven't set up your work environment yet, you can go to GitHub to find a step-by-step guide on how to set up your RDK emulator along with the MAF3 SDK. You should start by installing Node.js, VirtualBox and 7-Zip, following by cloning the corresponding repositories and installing the necessary Node modules. This part only has to be done once, but you will need to keep your MAF SDK up to date by pulling the latest changes regularly. To test your apps in the RDK emulator, you should follow the whole manual before you can start building your apps. I opened my project folder called MAF3 SDK Webinar into my favorite editor. And now we can start creating our own app. To do this, we can make a copy of already existing folder called com.metrological.app.empty-template. So I'm going to duplicate this one. And I'm going to rename it to com.metrological.app.webinar app. So this folder will be our own app for now. It's very important to fix all the references to the old name. One of those places is the metadata.json. This file holds all the necessary information we need to know about the app, including the identifier, the name of our app, I'm going to call it webinar app, the author, the company, a possible copyright and a description. And we're going to make a description named our first app. So at this point the app won't run yet. We have to add the new app to our index, which you can find in the index.html. In the apps object over here you will see several identifiers, and we need to add our own, which is the webinar app. And at this point we should have a running app. So we're going to test it in the browser. To load the new app into the SDK, we need to refresh the store. As you can see, our app is now loaded in SDK. And now we can start our first app. As you can see, it's a beautiful empty app. And it's time to start filling it up. To do that, we're going to open the first view, which is located in our app name, contents, JavaScript, views, and then my view. And this is the place where the magic happens. So we got several functions, including the create view and the update view. The create view will always be called the first time the view is created, and the update view is called every time the user navigates to that view. So the first time both the create view and the update view will be loaded, but after the first time the create view won't be loaded again. So we're going to add a new element to our view, which is the text element. New math.element dot text. And it holds a label, which is hello world. At this point the text label won't be appended to our view, so we need to append it first. And view is a reference to this within the create view, which is the whole class. And at this moment when we check in our browser, when we reload our app, you can see we have a new Hello World label in our app. It is positioned at the left top of the view, and we want to append some styling to it. Which we can do with the styles object. First of all, we want it to be a bit bigger. So we add some font size. We're going to put it to 30. The width will be the same width as the view. And anchor style will be center. So as you can see, we now have a bigger Hello World label, which is centered to the middle. We can only do this because we appended a width to the element. We can inspect that with our web inspector. And as you can see, the element has a width of 588 pixels and a vertical line middle and a text line center. And those two are from the anchor style. As you can see, you can write CSS in that style object, but there are several other keys which you can use, including anchor style, which will append a few default CSS elements to your element. A Hello World app is not a very useful app, so we will need to expand our app a little. But first we will test our app in the RDK emulator to see if it's still the same. So to do that, we're going to start our virtual environment. So when our environment is booted, you see several buttons, including the one where you can find your own IP address, which you will need for the getting started. But now we're going to boot our SDK environment within the RDK emulator. And now we can find our app in the app listing. As you can see, the virtual environment is limited to less performance, which emulates the setup boxes a bit. So you get a real feeling on how your app is going to run. And as you can see, we have our app, Hello World, and it's the same as in our browser. So that's a good thing. So now we can continue developing and extend our little app. So as you saw in the app listing, our app still has a little black icon. We're going to update that first. So we're going to overwrite our icon. So I prepared a icon already. So I'm drag that into the images folder. Remove the old one. And rename it to the original name. As you can see, there's an icon.psd, which you can use as a template to creating a new icon. You don't really have to rename it to icon.png as long as it matches the path specified in the metadata.json. So when we open our app, it now has our new icon in it, which is fine. So now we're going to extend our app, because only a text field is not much. So we're going to append a new element, which will be a grid. And that's an element that contains different data sets. So I prepared a little snippet of code already for the grid. As you can see, I referenced the grid this time to view.elements.datagrid instead of not referencing it at all. We need to do that to enable addressing this component from elsewhere than the create view. The math element grid has several other keys that provide information to the grid itself, which includes rows, columns, and the styles you've seen before. The cell creator and the cell updater. The cell creator is called whenever a new cell is created. Sounds logical. And the cell updater is whenever new data needs to be displayed in the cell itself. So at this point, we don't really have a data set yet. So we're going to create one. And now we can append that to our grid. We need to create a new text element on our cell to display our new dataset. So we're going to do that by using cell.title is new math.element.text. Actually the same as before. And we need to append it not to the view, of course, but to the cell itself. In order to use any dimensions of the cell here, like the width, cell.width, and height, cell.height, we need to specify the width and the height here as well. It will be calculated after the cell is created. But at that point we won't have the width and the height for our title here. Instead of making a new object, we only want the dimensions. And luckily the grid has it for us. So we can say this dot get cell dimensions. And then we need to update our text label. With our data object, which will return A, B, C, D, etc. So now we're going to test it in the browser. So now when we open our app and inspect the view, you can see that we have a base grid which has a couple of cells, but we don't see them yet because our main grid doesn't have any width or height yet. So we need to specify that. It's the same width as the view. And the height is the view dot height minus the height of the text element hello world, but we don't have a reference to that object yet, so we need to create one. And there's a difference between the outer height and using the height. The height returns the height itself, while the outer height returns the height plus the position of the element. So if the hello world label is positioned a bit lower, then it will take those 10 pixels to the top with the outer height. It's still positioned over the text label, so we need to let it position under it. The V offset, which is of course the vertical offset, should be the hello world label dot outer height. And now it's positioned under the hello world label. But at this point we reached the milestone, so it's quite important to test it in the RDK emulator as well. So we're going to do that now. And as you can see, we have the hello world label and the grid beneath it. And it works the same as in the browser. So now we can go back to developing and including a new dataset, a real one. Now we're going to replace our static dataset for a dynamic one. And for that we need to do a request. The request is from a URL from BBC, which shows the latest technology news. And we're going to call the feed over the proxy. The proxy enables us to convert the XML into JSON, which we are going to use here. So when the call is successful, we need to change the dataset from the test dataset into our dataset from BBC, but we're not really sure what the request is going to return. So we're going to place a log of the object we're going to receive. And then we can use the web inspector to see what kind of data is returned. So when we reboot our app, we open our web inspector, we can see that an object is returned. And it contains rss.channel and item. In the item key, there's an array containing all the news items we want. So when we return to our editor, we know that we can update our data grid, change data set, and as a parameter we enter json.rss.channel.item. And now when we open our app, we can see that we have object instead of the characters we had from the array, which is a good thing. So now we don't need our dataset anymore. But showing object is not really useful. So we need to update our cell updater and we're going to update our title element with title. So we create another text field, which is called description. It has two visible lines, which means that the element will be given a height exactly the same as the line height of two lines. Some font size, some width, which we can also apply to our title. The height will be less, of course. Well, we can wrap that to two visible lines as well. We need to apply some more styling to it. We need a wrap through, else the line will still be on one line instead of two. And the description has a truncation, which means if the text is longer than 2 lines, it will be truncated by 3 dots. And we can update our desk with description. And now when we open our app, we have a beautiful new updated app, which holds several news items. The grid also has a function to page through the items, and you can do that with the left and the right buttons instead of top and bottom. And it goes further through the data set. Doesn't go any further than this because we have 30 objects. So now we used a request to update this grid, but we don't have the image yet, and maybe there's a longer description than the one you see here because of the truncation. So we want to make a new view which holds the full information. And to open that view, we have to apply a new event to the cell, which is the on select. And here we're going to log the information. So every time we press the enter button, we should see some new information. And it shows the latest data item you selected. And that information is needed to pass through into the new view. And to create a new view, we need to do a math.application.load view. But we don't have a new view yet. So we have to duplicate our original view. We're going to rename it. My detail view. Open our new view. Of course, I need to change all the references as well. And we can empty our functions again to start over. And we have to register our new view through the init.js. So we have to include our new view as well. And make a reference to it. So at this point, we can open this new view by using this ID. and pass on the data we need to show the new elements. So in the My Detail view, we want to know the information, so we can place a log of the this or the view dot persist, and that holds the data we send over from the previous view. I placed a log in the update view because, like I said before, the create view is only called once, and we want to update the new labels every time the user opens this view. You can see that the object is logged 2 times, one before we send it over and one after. So this one is the before, this one is the one after, and you can see it's the same data. But now we don't really have a way to go back to the previous view. So we're going to create a new button to go back to the previous view, which will be my back button. And we have a default button for this. And we need to append it to the view. So now when we go back and reload our view, we have a back button, which enables us to go back to the grid every time. So now we're going to create our new text labels. Which is a title, a pub date, and a description. And update those fields from the update view. So when we open an item, we have a title, publication date, and the description. Some items also return an image, and that one is found in item, object, media thumbnail. There's 2 objects in there. There are 2, a smaller one and a bigger one, and we always want the last one because it's the largest one of the 2. But first we need to make a new element to hold the image, and that's the image object located in MOV element image. It has an aspect auto. By using aspect, the image will go through our own resizing CDN, which caches the image and returns the right size. And we need to set the source of that image. So that's view, persist, the media thumbnail. And because it's an array, we need to select the last one, which is the array.length -1, then request the URL key. And now when we open an item, we have an image. Now we're at a point where we reach another milestone, and we need to make sure the app works in the RDK emulator as well. So it's time to move on to the RDK emulator. And so far we used the web inspector of the browser, and now we're going to use the web inspector of the RDK emulator to track our calls. To do that, you have to open a regular browser window, go to the IP address of your virtual environment, and go to port 9222. Then when you go to that page, you will see one single link. When you click on it, it opens the web inspector from the browser in the RDK emulator. And then when we open the console, we can keep track of our calls. So as you can see, we received our data set. And now when we navigate to one of the items, it has an error because there isn't an image in there. When we go back and use one with an image, it doesn't return an error. So that's an error we still need to fix. But aside of that image error, navigating through the app still works. It opens the new view and you can see the objects returned. So now it's time to go back to the app, fix our error, and extend our app for the last time. So first we have to fix our error. So we start off by checking if the error really didn't exist in the browser. So we navigate to the item. Here we go. Here's the error. So it was in the browser before, but we didn't see it yet. And it's because the media thumbnail array doesn't exist. So if there isn't a media thumbnail array in the persist object, we use a blank image to update our source. This one has an image. This one has an image. This one doesn't have an image, and now it falls back to the image blank. There's one last thing that I want to add, and that's a button which enables you to view the whole news item on your telephone. We're going to use a QR code for that. We're going to create a button. The QR button is a control text button, so it's a mix of a regular button and the text element. You can add a new label to it, and in this case we use Font Awesome, which is a library that returns icons as a font, and we request QR code, append some styling to it, and it toggles the visibility of the QR container, which we don't have yet, so we're going to add that, which is a MAF element container, which is an element that can hold several other elements. Thus the name container. With some styling. And it is and the onSelect also focuses the close QR container button, which we're going to add. This time we use Font Awesome get times, which is a little cross. And what it does is on select, it toggles the QR container visible false and focuses the QR button again. So when we are going to open the browser, relaunch our app, you'll see that we have a new button over here. And when I press it, it opens as a black container with a new button at the top, which is the little cross, which enables closing of the container. Now we need to append our QR code to this container, for which we use an image. And it's appended to the QR container instead of the view. And we're going to update that image the same way we update the news item. So in the update view, we do a set source on the QR code, and we use the QR code object, which returns the QR code in an image with the corresponding URL, which we can find in the link object in the persist. So now when we go back, relaunch our app, open a QR, we will have a QR code. So when we scan this with our telephone or with your tablet or anything else with a QR code scanner, it will open the full size news item on that device. So yeah, that seems to work. So now we're going to test it in the RDK emulator and see if it's still working there. So we open the app. Open the first item. Open the QR code. Yep, it's working. So both the regular browser and the RDK emulator render the app the same. It looks the same, it works the same. So now we're ready to upload our app in the meteorological dashboard so that other operators have your app in the App Store. So now that our app is zipped, we can upload it to the dashboard. Now all we have to do is wait. Our app is now uploaded and ready for operators to add to their App Store. So I hope this webinar helped you create your own app. If you have any questions, please refer to the corresponding GitHub repositories. And if you have a question, you can leave a ticket there with the right label, and we will get back to you as soon as possible.